I'm Shanavas, a student of second year Information Technology Department, and all the students and staff of GH Raisoni Institute of Business Management welcomes you all for this wonderful session on the topic Explainable Artificial Intelligence under the short-term training program on the topic Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence. So in this series, I would like to hand over the mic to Mrs. Sonal Patil ma'am, Head of Computer Science and Information Technology Department, to say a few words. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shahnawaz. So, a very warm good afternoon to one and all present over here. Now we are again joined for the new interesting pioneering session of explainable artificial intelligence, which is a really new topic. And as per its name, really it will be very interesting to learn the new techniques. I'm very much thankful to Thomas ma'am for accepting our invitation and for sparing the precious and valuable time with all of us today, and she will be guiding us. I welcome you, ma'am, on behalf of GH Raisoni Institute of Business Management, Jalgaon. And from my bottom of heart, I am thankful to you for accepting our invitation and sparing your valuable time. Thank you so much, ma'am. In this series, I have shared the schedule, and we have kept the quiz on each and every day. Almost 3 sessions were there in STTP throughout the day, and all that 3 sessions quizzes were there, and that quiz all participants have to attend. And I'm very much happy. Day by day we have received number of active learners and top scorers in the quiz, so that's a good sign that all the participants have enjoyed this knowledgeable journey of STTP, that I want to mention here. And once again, I'm thankful to you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation. Over to you, Shahnawaz.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable words. Now, I would like to introduce our today's resource person. Our today's resource person is Professor A. Thomas, ma'am. She received MPhil in Computer Science in 2011, the MTech degree in Computer Science and Engineering in 2013, and is currently pursuing her PhD in Computer Science. She was head of MCA department from 2009 to 14, Dean PG 2014 to 16, head of CSE 2016 to 18, and is currently heading the Department of Artificial Intelligence at GH Raisoni Institute of College of Engineering, Nagpur. Since its inception in 2019, she has been involved in several projects related to data mining, data text mining, business intelligence, and machine learning. Her area of interests are machine learning, natural language processing, data mining, programming. She was the software in charge at GH Raisoni College of Engineering and has successfully implemented many software projects in the institute. She was instrumental in implementing Moodle CMS at the institute. She was the recipient of the Best Teachers Award in 2013-14, Special Achievement Award in 2013 for implementation of online examination system in GHRCE, and Special Achievement Award for initiating and motivating the students for participation in Smart India Hackathon. Now, before handing over the mic to Mrs. Professor A. Thomas, ma'am, I would like to mention all the participants that please stay on mute for the smooth conductance of the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Shanavas. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So thank you very much. I would like to start sharing my screen. Now, before I share my screen, I would be stopping my video because otherwise there might be streaming issues from my end. So only for the introduction I had started. I will just stop my video sharing. All right. And I'll take you to my presentation now. Right. Yes, I hope everybody can see the screen.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So my presentation is viewable, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. So shall we start?
Yes, sure, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Shanavas. And thank you so much, Sonal Patil ma'am, for inviting me for this session. I am really honored. Okay, so good afternoon to everyone and welcome to the session on explainable AI. Explainable AI is a research area that has been gaining momentum in the last few years. And however, before I go to the actual topic, I would like to cover some background. So this is the content of my presentation. We'll be first looking at the AI milestones, the history of AI, which is very rich. And then we will go through the impact of AI and what some of the failures that happen in AI before I introduce the topic of explainable AI. And we will see the relevance of explainable AI. And I will be exploring two particular models, that is LIME and SHAP, before I conclude. Right. So you see, as you can see, AI has a long history of being the next big thing. Okay, and if you see this journey that AI has taken over the years from 1950 to the current year, you will see there has been many highs and lows, right? The birth of AI happened, in 1950, it all started with Alan Turing asking a question, can machines think? And then in 1956, we have the birth of AI at the Dartmouth conference when the term artificial intelligence was coined by John McCarthy. Now, in that same conference, we have John McCarthy, Marvin Minsky, Claude Shannon, all big names, right? They propose that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it, right? And this has set the direction for subsequent AI research efforts. Now, just around that time in 1958, we have Frank Rosenblatt, who created the perceptron learning algorithm. I'm sure you've heard of it. It is the simplest of neural network with just one layer of neurons, which connects the inputs to the outputs. However, very soon it was proven that the single layer perceptron, it can only recognize linearly separable patterns and it could not recognize complex patterns. And therefore, neural networks research stagnated for almost a decade until the researchers came up with multi-layer perceptrons, which with sufficient computing power was very effective for modeling complex relationships. And this is the principle that we have behind all our deep learning networks with many complex layers of neurons, right? Now here you can see two downfalls, right? You can see one is in between 1974 to 1980, you can see that the graph is going down. And similarly, between 1987 to 93, you can see the graphs going down. Then these particular regions are called as the AI winters. Okay, it is called AI winter because the funding for AI was at its lowest during these periods. And the reason for that is so the first AI winter happened because of a problem called as combinatorial explosion, where combinatorial explosion means the computing time that is required to solve a problem, it was increasing exponentially as a function of the input size. Okay, now this meant that even for small toy problems, to get an AI solution, you would require very, very high computational power, and it was not possible back then. Or rather, we call it now the curse of dimensionality. And that had struck a blow on AI research. Another fundamental limitation was Moravec's paradox, if you've heard of it. It is a comparative, so they say that it is very easy for computers to exhibit adult level performance, like playing chess or trying to calculate the value of pi to billion digits. But it is very difficult or even impossible for them to give skills of a 1-year-old when it comes to perception and mobility. In fact, in short, if you want to explain this, you would say hard problems are very easy for an AI system, but the easy problems are very hard for an AI system. And therefore, you see research in computer vision and robotics had made very little progress in the 1970s. Okay. And then the next AI boom after the first AI winter, the next there was a boom again, and this period that is from 1980 to 97, you saw there was a lot of growing interest, and that is because of the advent of expert systems. So there were Lisp machines which became very popular as specialized systems, and they had this decision making ability of human experts, and they were able to diagnose infectious diseases. So these expert systems eventually they proved to be very expensive. It was very difficult to update the systems. The systems were not able to learn and therefore very brittle, and they could not handle unusual inputs. So very soon you saw the consumers started losing interest and they no longer wanted these expensive machines. And because of which it led to the collapse of the market. So here you have the next AI winter coming in. Okay, the entire industry worth almost $500 million, it was replaced in a single year. Okay, and then we progressed, to this era when we have very high computational power at very, very cheap rates, right? So I think all students also carry GPUs right now, right? So with this explosive growth and these technological advances, they have made us, it has made easy for us to run highly computational models. And we have a ray of hope right now. So that is, you all know Andrew Ng. He is a professor of AI at Stanford University, and he says AI is the new electricity, which is very true, right? Artificial intelligence is it's very much a part of all our lives. So our life has become so much easier with it. So we have uh, in our phones. We have recommendation systems. You go shopping online, and there are so many recommendations coming your way. There are voice assistants, Alexa, Siri. When you travel, Google Maps are a real blessing, right? So even if you don't know directions, your phone is there. You will reach your destination correctly. You go and log into FB, and you see that the photos that you upload on FB is able to recognize you. They tag us, right? Now these examples are just very few examples of AI. AI has impacted even the biggest industries. So you have healthcare, insurance, agriculture, education, so many industries which have been impacted by AI. In fact, it is a big wave that is going to sweep away many traditional ways of doing things, and we all agree to this, or at least we believe it as of now, right? But you see, there is a flip side to it. So let us now we've talked about all the good things that I have bought. Let us, I just happened to Google what are some of the failures that is there. In fact, and I came up with a few of these examples. In fact, these were, if you see the reference, it says top 8 funniest and shocking AI failures of all time, right? And the funny part of it is that there are all big names involved. So you see Microsoft, Amazon, Google. These are the big names that have made the funniest AI failures, right? So let us see a few of them. In fact, I'll just share with you what were the failures here. So you have Microsoft's AI chatbot Tay. I do not know if you all are aware of this, but so this is a chatbot that was launched by Microsoft somewhere in 2016, and it was programmed to have casual conversations with a language of a typical millennial. Okay, so now this chatbot Tay, it was supposed to learn from these interactions with people, and so that it can hold better conversations in the future. However, when the chatbot was launched by Microsoft on Twitter, it had to be taken down in less than a day. Okay, within a day, they had to take it down. Why? Because knowing the vulnerabilities of this particular system, knowing that the system is going to be learning from all the conversations, there were many people who manipulated it. And as a result, they started making very deeply sexist and racist statements. And Peter Lee, who was the Microsoft corporate VP for AI research, he had to issue a public apology, and he said he took the full responsibility for not seeing this possibility ahead of time. So you see, a company like Microsoft could not judge this, right? Next, we have this Amazon's AI powered recruiting tool. This was built to review job application resumes, and this model was trained to verify the applications which came to the company over a period of 10 years. Now, once the system started implementing, what they realized was that the new system was not rating the candidates in a very gender neutral way. So what had happened is, over this period of 10 years, the number of females being recruited were very less as compared to the males. And now the system had learned this bias. And because of this, whenever there was a new applicant who was a female who came in, the probability of her recruitment went low. So that was the problem that Amazon obviously had to do away with this AI powered recruiting tool. Next is the Google Photos AI Panorama. You must have used it. So what Google Photos does is, when you take many photos with your phone camera, and if they have similar backgrounds, then AI, what does is, it kind of merges all those photos for you. And you can see one such blunder that happened here. In fact, and it has merged the photos, but you can see a person's face which has come as part of it. And somehow the system never recognized this, right? Another very funny episode happened with facial recognition in China. Okay, so China, they have this system of tracking jaywalkers. Now, jaywalkers are basically pedestrians who cross the road while the traffic is on. Okay, and that is supposed to be it's wrong. You are not supposed to cross the roads when your traffic is on. So such people are called as jaywalkers, and they had made a system to track these jaywalkers. So the facial recognition system, what it would do is it will track all these people who are jaywalking, and they would display these people's name and face on big boards all around China. And what has happened is this facial recognition system, it was doing quite well. But one fine day, there was this lady who was a billionaire, and her photo appeared on one of the buses advertisement. Okay, so this bus had this advertisement of her face, and when the bus moved, this facial recognition system detected her face, and then it was blown up and put up in all the displays with her name on. So you see the now she wasn't there, right? She wasn't there. It was just her face that appeared on an advertisement, but the facial recognition system could not recognize this as whether it was a jaywalker or not. So that's another blooper, right? Another interesting case is Boston's Dynamics robot. Now, Boston Dynamics robot, they had what do you say, displayed this robot this during a congress. So they were introducing this humanoid robot to the audience, and this robot was doing really well. In fact, this video is there online in YouTube. You can check it out. So the robot is performing very well. In fact, I have an image of this robot on the left of my screen. This robot would walk around, it was picking up things, it was moving things from one place to another. Absolutely fantastic, just like a human. However, towards the end of the program, this robot, it trips on a curtain and it falls off stage. So that is though the robot could do many things, somehow it could not really predict its fall. Another episode is Amazon's Rekognition. Amazon's Rekognition, basically, again, it's a facial recognition software, but this time it matched 28 Congress people with mugshots of criminals. And nearly 40% of these matches were people of color, which means that the system was racially discriminating, right? So that is again bad. And then this is the famous World Cup 2018 predictions as to who would win the World Cup. So many AI enthusiasts were very eager to know who's going to win, because there were many predictions that came up. And sadly, it was only Brazil that could make it to the quarterfinals. Spain and Germany, which was predicted to be amongst the winners, could not even reach the quarterfinals. Right now, you see, these were big names, big systems, big models, which had started implementations, but there were a lot of failures. Right. So with this kind of background, what we understand is that, though we say that AI is around and we say that AI has got a lot of potential, there is a lot of time before we can actually say that they are superior to humans, right? I think we have a long way to go. There's a lot of research to be done. Now, with all this background, I have a question for you. We all know that India is facing very tough times with rising cases of COVID, and not only are the COVID cases rising, but also research on COVID is also rising to manifold, right? Now, with all that, suppose you develop some kind of, God forbid, but you develop some kind of COVID symptoms, and you happen to go to this hospital, and the hospital person tells you that, okay, we have just installed an AI system, and it is going to check whether you are COVID positive or not. And you share your symptoms with this system, this AI system. And what happens is the system tells you, okay, you are COVID negative or you're corona negative, right? My question to all of you is, how many of you would, be happy about it and just go back home and decide not to, worry at all? Okay, let me see if I can see the chat box. Yeah. Yeah. So I would like to know how many of you all would be okay with this prediction? Yes, okay, yes, no, maybe. There's no yes. All right. We are not okay. We are not happy. Okay. And now my question to you is why? When I'm telling you that the system is 99% accurate, I'm sure all of you are planning to make machine learning models, and some of you would have already made those models. And you always look at the accuracy. So when I tell you that the system is 99% accurate, when I say that the system is 99% accurate, why is it that you doubt the system so much, right? Okay, so someone says, Amruta says it's mindset, and Shanawaz says that after all, it's a machine. All right, okay. Correct. You are, I mean, it's not just about you, it's about me also. I would not trust that system, right? So that is what we are looking for. So when we talk about AI systems, coming into the health industry, I mean, how can we bring in those systems if we are not able to generate that trust in those systems, right? So what is the reason for it? I'll tell you the reason. So you see, we spoke about two types of AI systems. One is the systems like movie recommendation, voice recognition, email classification, shopping recommendations. Now, these systems are the less complex AI systems, and the cost of a bad decision is very low. Now, what do I mean by cost of a bad decision? So somebody recommends to you, or a movie recommender system recommends to you a bad movie. At max, what you would lose is 3 hours of time for watching that movie. If a voice recognition system fails to recognize your voice, probably you will lose some time trying to explain to it what exactly you want. If an email classification system wrongly classifies your mails, you probably will just go into the junk box and see if, or the spam box to see if your actual mails have reached the spam, right? So the cost is not very high. I mean, it's okay. It may be just few hours of your time, or it may be, it does not affect you as such. But let's talk about more complex systems. Like if we have driverless cars, or we have a robot performing surgery, or we talk about smart homes, we have AI which is being used in security, right? The cost of a bad decision is very high. So if a driverless car has to meet with an accident, or suppose it hits a person, okay, and suppose it fails to recognize something that is in front of it, then what would be the cost? The cost may be human life, or it may be the cost of many lives, right? So if I tell you that, we are you are just boarding your flight, and you come to know that the an AI system is going to be driving your flight instead of the pilot, you see, it is such a risky thing, right? So you see the cost there. Now if something fails there, what will happen is, you're putting the life of so many people who are traveling by that airplane at risk, and therefore the cost here of a bad decision is going to be very high, right? Now at this point, I would like to bring forward another case study. So here we have an AI system which has been trained to predict pneumonia risk, okay, of a person, arrived at totally wrong conclusion. What happened is, from the real data, the model had learned that asthmatic patients with heart problems have much lower risk of dying of pneumonia than healthy persons. Okay, now doctors know it otherwise. This is not true, because asthma is a factor that negatively affects the recovery of in case of pneumonia. Now, what went wrong here? The training data, it was systematically biased. Why? Because in contrast to healthy persons, the majority of these asthma patients, they were under strict medical supervision. So the data that you considered of these asthma patients, all of them were under medical supervision. And therefore, this group had a significant lower risk of dying of pneumonia. Now, you see here, both the learning and the inference algorithm, they worked correctly, and the training data also represented real cases. But the selection of the training data was not appropriate for predictions, and therefore it might affect many other people who use this system, right? And this is what we call as a black box AI system. So if we use an AI system like this, which acts like a black box, where you don't know why the system has given you an input, or why a particular output, you're not able to explain it, you're not able to justify it. Why would a doctor use a AI model which is not able to tell it why a particular diagnosis happened? So in such cases, the trust is very low. I do not know how many of you are aware of GDPR. So in May 2018, the General Data Protection Regulation, it was published, in which the European Union granted their citizens right to explanation if they are affected by algorithmic decision making. It means that explainable AI will become very important to all the groups of stakeholders, including users, the affected people, and the developers of AI systems. So if your model is affecting any person, that person has the right to explanation. And that is what GDPR states, which means now when you decide to develop a machine learning model, you have to be very cautious, because you have to think about what kind of effect it can bring onto the users of the system, and you are accountable for it. So now I come into the topic of explainable AI. So in many real world applications, such business decisions, process optimizations, medical diagnosis, investment recommendation, explainability and transparency of our AI systems are very, very essential for the users, especially for the people who are going to be affected by our AI decisions. So therefore, explainable AI has become a new research topic in the context of modern deep learning. Why particularly deep learning? We will soon see it. So what is this need for explainable AI? You can see a user of a system here, and today's AI is like this. Okay, so you have your training data, you have your machine learning process, you have your learned functions, and then it kind of gives you some kind of a decision or a recommendation. And the user has absolutely no idea why you do that, why not something else, when do you succeed, when do you fail, when can I trust you, how do I correct an error? Nothing. The user is not aware of any. When it comes to these questions, he's totally blank. He just knows that there's some complex uh, function that is going on inside, and it has given me this output. And you know that it is 90% accurate, right? But this is not the kind of systems that we need, and this is not the systems that can survive. Let me tell you, with such systems, we will probably have another AI winter. All right. And if we want to avoid that winter, then what we need to see is we need to have a model like this. So whenever you give, your new machine learning process should have this explainable model or an explanation interface wherein the user is satisfied and he understands why your model has given a particular output, why it has not given some other output. It should be able to explain to you when you will succeed, when you will fail. It should be able to trust your model, and it should be able to know when you will make an error. So all this is what is a part of explainable AI. I hope all of you have got a very good introduction to explainable AI and you are understanding what it means. So who are the stakeholders of this particular system? Okay, so matlab, stakeholders, I mean, for whom is it important? So obviously it is important to the users who utilize the AI system. So if it is a medical doctor, he will want to understand what pathological features in the input data were guiding the algorithm before accepting an auto-generated diagnosis reports. You know, many people are doing X-ray classification. Many people are trying to detect cancer from X-ray images, or so many things are going on. But why would the doctor accept your reasoning or your classification unless you tell it that these are the factors which has the reason why your system has given you such an output? A maintenance engineer would want to understand what is the abnormal phenomena that captured the inference algorithm before following the repair recommendations that your system provides, right? A financial investor would like to know what are the influencing factors before he makes the final investment. So we have to verify that the AI inference works as expected, because wrong decisions can be very costly and it can be very dangerous. So one stakeholder is the users of the system. Second are the people who are going to be affected by your AI decision. You know, there is this interesting case study of Houston schools, which used an AI algorithm called as educational value added assessment system to evaluate the performance of teachers. And what happened is, uh, some of the teachers were given negative reviews, and what the teachers did is uh, this they contested this particular system in the code, because the AI system could not justify why those negative reviews were given. Okay, now this explainable AI system would be very good for the developers of the algorithm also. Let's see how. Because explainable, when you give explanations to your system, it will help you in detecting data bias, it will help you in discovering mistakes in the models, and it will also help you to reduce the weaknesses. You can take, for example, this particular image that you can see. Okay, you see, we are trying to recognize aeroplane, bicycle, bird, boat, bottle. And if you see, the model is recognizing, the accuracy is not very great. But for horse, you can see that the accuracy is quite high as compared to the other elements. So you see the horse is 80.45% of the times Fisher vector model is able to recognize a horse, and the DeepNet model is able to recognize it 81.6% times. Now that is very good accuracy, right? But now if you look into the explanation, so here what you see is a saliency map. So saliency map basically tells you that which part of the algorithm is responsible for your output. Okay. And if you look at the Fisher vector model, and this is the network model. So in the Fisher network model, you can see that this particular area has been highlighted. Okay, the red area at the bottom. And what you see in the actual image is this is a tag. And this tag happened to be present in all the images which had a horse in it. Okay, so that means that the Fisher vector model was looking at this tag and it was saying that the image was a horse. It wasn't looking at the horse and saying that the image was a horse. Okay, and now that means that this system would not be able to actually recognize a horse. Similarly, but you can see the deep learning systems, it has got all the right reasons for believing that the system was a horse, the image was of a horse, right? So you see, when I get explanations for my system, I'm able to better formulate or better work on my model. I can remove all these biases. So now when I see that, okay, this is what is recognizing, I can try to find more images which does not have this tag so that my system learns with better data. All right. So let's move ahead. So the machine learning algorithms nowadays that we have, all these algorithms, they are, they have a relationship between accuracy and explainability. And the relationship is that the higher the prediction accuracy, the lower is the model explainability. So you can see here, deep learning has got very high prediction accuracy. But if you see explainability, it is very low. If you look at SVMs, or you can look at decision trees, they have very good explainability, but the prediction accuracy is very low. So this relationship exists between prediction accuracy and explainability. So these are some of the explainable ML models that are currently there. Okay, so linear models, decision trees, these are explainable. So if I have a linear model which has some relationship like y is equal to 3x1 plus 2x2, if I change the value of x1, I know it will affect the value of y 3 times, right? So it is quite explainable. If I take a decision tree, for example, now this is the decision tree of the Titanic data set. And if I say that the passenger is a male, I will say that the survival rate is only 36%. Now it is explainable because I can see that this is the reason or this is the model that has been generated. But what about deep learning networks? I give inputs, I get the output. I don't even have to do feature selection. The system itself selects the features for me, right? So it is like a black box. It is not at all explanatory, and neither by the neural network nor by any external explanatory component, and not even by the developers of the system. So, and this is what we use, and this is what there's a lot of hype about, right? So now what we are explainable AI is all about trying to bring in the explanations here, okay, even in the deep learning models. So there are many categories of explainability. So we have post hoc systems versus anti hoc systems, and then we have model agnostic and model dependent, and local versus global. By the end of this lecture, I'm assuming that all of you will understand the meanings of each of these words. Let's first start with anti-hoc models. So anti-hoc techniques are techniques which wherein the explainable models are baked into the model from the beginning. So right from the beginning, the explainability part of it is very much inside the model. Okay. And post hoc techniques, they allow the models to be trained normally, the way we normally train it. And the explainability part is at the end. That is, during testing time, we will have one more layer which does the explanation part. Okay. We have model agnostic and model dependent. Now, model dependent or model specific interpretation, they mean that your tools are specific to a single model or a group of models. So for example, I would say that I'm able to explain, so my explainability model will be able to explain, say, support vector machines, or it will be able to explain a particular class of deep learning models. So they are model dependent, okay? But uh, model agnostic explainability is when irrespective of which model it is, I'm able to explain it. Okay, so we are going to look at two methods today, which are model agnostic, which means irrespective of what type of model is there, I'm still able to give explanations to it. So we'll see how. And then we have local versus global. Local explainability is it aims to explain the model's behavior for a specific input. So for each individual input, I'm able to give an explanation. And global explainability, it attempts to understand the concept of the entire model. So you understand that the explanations of the entire model is going to be highly complex. So if I'm going to explain it, the model as a whole, that is going to be difficult, and that's called as global explainability. So here, the two algorithms that we're going to look at today, they are local models. Local models means we are going to attempt to explain specific inputs. So these are some of the popular explainable models. So we have Lime, DeepLift, Eli5. Now Eli5 is explain like I'm 5. So you are explaining like you are a 5-year-old. The explanations that you would give a 5-year-old. You have SHAP and layer-wise relevance propagation. These are just few of them. Let me tell you, there are many more. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you two models, two interesting models, Lime and SHAP. They were the models which were initially released. And of course, there are many other newer models coming up. But since these are the basic ones, I thought I would throw light on them. All right. So let's move towards Lime first. Now, so this is an explainable, this is an explanation given by a Lime model. So the data set here is a 20 news groups data set, which is quite a benchmark data set used for comparing different models. And here we are trying to classify emails as either mails which are Christianity based or atheism based. Okay. And we have trained a random forest with 500 trees, and the accuracy is around 92.4%. Okay, the system is quite accurate. 92.4 is quite a high accuracy. I'm sure you all agree, right? And now what the system is doing is we are trying to explain the output. Okay, so we have a particular text here. We have a text here, and these commands are giving me the explanation for this text. So you see there are certain words which have been highlighted, and this particular text has been classified as atheism, which is correct. All right, it is an atheism. This particular text is got something to do with atheism, but the explanations, if you look at it, you can see that words which are highlighted. You have edu, NNTP, posting, host, there, have. So these are the words which made the classifier classify this particular text as atheism. Now, it's only when you look into the explanation that you realize that something is wrong, because these words have got nothing to do with atheism. Then how is it that your system is accurately classifying it as atheism? So if you take a dive deeper, and when the people try to look into it, look into the training set and the test set, what they found out is that the word posting appeared around 21.6% of times in the training set of the atheism text, okay, and only 2% times in the Christian text. Similarly, even in the test set, 20% of the time this posting word had come in, and in the Christian text, it appeared only twice. So because of this, they related this word of posting to atheism, which is which is wrong, right? Which is absolutely wrong. So you see how an explanation has helped me or helped to better this, improve the system. So now you know that okay, your model is wrong, though it is accurate, your model is wrong, right? So here, this is an example of Lime explanation. So Lime is using or highlighting the words that are responsible for the classifier to have classified this particular text as atheism. I hope everybody is clear with this, and I hope I am audible and still, can I have some, okay, fine. So people are,
Yes, madam.
all right, thank you so
Yes,
much.
ma'am, we are getting, and everyone is
Mhm.
there, and you are audible too.
All right, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. All right. So this was a Lime explanation. You can see how the commands are given also. So how exactly does Lime work? Now, Lime is local interpretable model agnostic explanations. Now, those are very heavy words, right? But we will go by it one by one. Let me tell you that each part of that name, it reflects something that we desire in explanations. So how is it? Let's understand. So again, I repeat, it is local interpretable model agnostic explanations. What do you mean by local? So local refers to local fidelity. So we want the explanation to really reflect the behavior of the classifier around the instance being predicted. So I'm talking about a particular instance and I want my explanations to be dealt with around that particular instance. Okay, that is the reason I'm saying it is local. Interpretable. So now, like, take the example of the email text that we had just seen. Now, if you are aware of text classification, you know that internally these models, they use word embeddings to represent text, right? Now these word embeddings, if I give explanation in terms of these word embeddings, it's going to be very difficult for the end user. So instead, if instead of that, I'm going to use words, right? So you saw that words were highlighted. Now, because words were highlighted, it was easier, or rather it was more interpretable, right? That's what interpretable means. So we're going to use interpretable explanations, right? And the last one is model agnostic. What model agnostic means is that I am not going to look into the model. Okay, so this LIME algorithm, it does not look into the model. It only looks at the input, it looks at the output. It does not look into the working of the model. And that's what it means by saying it is model agnostic. Okay. So how does it do it? So when I'm not looking into the model, how am I supposed to give explanations to it, right? That's what should come into your mind. And okay, a word or two about LIME. So it works on any black box model. Model internals are hidden. So we are not bothered about the model internals. We are only bothered about the input and the output. And using prior knowledge, we can validate the explanations. And explanations are locally faithful, but not necessarily globally. Now, what do you mean by it is locally faithful and not necessarily global? So we'll see that. So you can see this particular diagram that is given at the side. Okay, so you can see that this is a particular model's decision function, and you can see. I hope you can see the red and pink background. Okay, and when you look at this decision boundary, it is very clear that this is a very non-linear function, right? It's non-linear. Now let's take a particular instance. So if I take this particular instance of a red cross, okay, what I'm going to do is I want to predict this instance, or I want to explain this instance. So for explaining this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider, uh, I will take some sample instances, or rather I would say sample perturbed instances. When I say perturbed, what I mean is I'm going to change a few values here and generate some samples around this particular instance. Okay, they are called as perturbed instances around this X. And then I'm going to allot it some weight. Now this weight is going to be based on the proximity with this particular instance. So the ones that are closer, you can see here, the ones that are closer are larger in size, which basically shows the weight of that particular instance. And the ones that are farther away, they are smaller in size because they are far away from the instance. Okay, so the weights here are going to be the size. So the size represents the weights. And what I'm going to do is for each of these perturbed instances, I'm going to see what my model is going to output. So here, see, in this case, it has been what do you say, classified as a red cross. Here it has been classified as a red cross. Here it has been classified as a blue circle. Okay, so I'm considering only instances around this central instance, right? And now when I get the classification output of all these perturbed instances, I'm able to draw a linear model now. Okay, so now I'm able to draw a line which explains why this particular instance was classified as a red cross. Okay, now this is local in the sense that this explanation is not valid for an instance which is here or for an instance which is here. All right, it will not be valid. And that's what I mean, that explanations are locally faithful, but not necessarily globally. Now this LIME, I forgot to mention this, but LIME, it was proposed by Ribeiro Marco. And he has written a very interesting paper called as Why Should I Trust You? I recommend all of you to read it because, the paper is really good. All right, let's move ahead. So let's understand. Now, I do not know how many of you all actually understood that particular explanation that I gave, but however, now I'm sure you will understand it better. So here we have another example. So this is what exactly LIME does. So you see, here we have an original image of a tree frog. Okay, and now I want to classify this image as a tree frog, and I want an explanation as well as to why this particular image is being classified as a tree frog. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to uh, divide my entire image into different instances. Okay, this entire image is going to be divided into interpretable components, also called as contiguous superpixels. So you can see the ones which are with the same kind of pixels, the same color of pixels, they're all grouped together. Okay, so my entire image has been divided into interpretable components. And now what I'm going to do is we'll generate a data set of perturbed instances by turning some of the interpretable components off. So what I mean by that is what I'm going to do is I'm going to gray out some of these areas. Okay, so suppose I want to, if this is my instance that I want to predict, I'm going to gray out all these other areas, and then I'm going to see what my model classifies. What is the probability that this is a tree frog if I just provide only this much part, or if I provide only this much part and I gray out everything else? Okay, that's what I meant by saying. So here you can see this is my original image, and the probability that it's a tree frog is around 0.54. All right. And here I have other perturbed instances where parts of this images are grayed out and only certain parts are fed into the system. And what happens is, you can see when I feed into this part of it, it gives me an accuracy of 0.8, I mean the probability of 0.85%. So that means these are the portions which are correctly identifying it as a tree frog. You see, when I gray out more areas of it, the accuracy, the probability is only 0.0001%, which means that these areas are not responsible for my explanation. And if I give almost the entire image with just a few area uh, grayed out, it gives me 0.52. Okay, so what exactly I'm doing, I'll repeat it again. What I'm doing is I'm taking my original image, I divide it into interpretable components, and I gray out certain areas, and I feed it back into the system and see what is the probability that it gives me. Now, once I get this output, okay, once I get this different probability, I do a local weighted regression, and what I get is I will get the pixels with the highest positive weights as the explanation. So basically, this is the part that actually the reason why which this particular image was classified as a tree frog. Okay, so this is how Lime works. So you understand, here we are not getting into the nuances of the model. So we are not looking into how the model works. What we are looking into is we are only looking at the input. We are changing the input slightly, and we are trying to see what effect it brings onto the output. And then we are treating it like a linear model. And the highest positive weights is what we give out as our explanation. I hope it's clear to everyone. Yes? All right. Good. Now let me take you further. This is another explanation which is by InceptionNet. Google's InceptionNet has predicted it. And you can see that for this image, it predicted this image. The explanation it gave is 0.54 as a tree frog. The probability that it was a billiards ball was 0.07%. And the probability that it was a balloon, a hot air balloon, it was 0.05%. And you see, with the explanation, it is quite clear why it said billiards, right? Because if you see this figure, okay, here it is a tree frog, all right. But if you look at the fingers of this particular frog, it looks like a billiards ball, right? And that's why it was classified as a billiards ball as 0.07%. And if you look at this heart that this tree frog is holding, it looks like a hot air balloon. So that's why 0.05%, it was even classified as a hot air balloon. So you see, such kind of explanations are going to help the developer to understand the model better. And in this particular case, it is model agnostic, which means we have not bothered to see how the model is working. We are only looking at the input changing, bringing about some perturbations in the input and trying to see what is going to be the output, and then building a linear model. So that is how Lime works. So again, Lime is local, interpretable, okay, model agnostic explanations. We'll move on to the next algorithm that I was talking about, and that is SHAP. Okay, SHAP stands for Shapely Additive Explanations. SHAP is a game theoretic approach to explain any machine learning model. Now, when I say game theoretical approach, there are two things that will combine, because if it's a game theory, then obviously there'll be a game and there'll be some players, right? So what does it have to do in a machine learning model? So here the game refers to reproducing the outcome of the model. And when we talk about players, we are talking about the different features of the model. So the features that you input to the model are your players, and the outcome that you get is your game. Okay, and we are adopting Shapley's rules. So Shapley had proposed this for game theory, and we are going to use those Shapley additive explanations for SHAP. Okay, SHAP is our model agnostic explanations that it's going to give, right? So what Shapley does is Shapley is the game theory model that what it does is it quantifies the contribution that each player brings to the game. And now what SHAP does is it is quantifying the contribution that each feature brings to the prediction made by the model. So we are going to see how each feature affects the prediction of the model, right? So you can see here again, it is about local interpretability, because for every instance, we are trying to predict what is the contribution of each of those features to the output. So this again, SHAP was proposed in a paper called as A Unified Approach to Interpreting Model Predictions by Scott Lundberg and Soo-In Lee. This paper is also available to download. So I would recommend all of you to go through it. So let's understand how SHAP works. So SHAP, let's consider, for example, a linear model that predicts the income of a person, knowing his age, gender, and job of the person. Okay, so we have three features as inputs, which is the age, the gender, and the job of the person. And our model predicts the income of the person. Now, uh, what Shapley values, the idea behind Shapley values is that each possible combination of players should be considered to determine the importance of a single player. So in our case, it is not player, but it's going to be features. So I will again repeat with features, that is each possible or combination of features should be considered to determine the importance of each feature. Okay, so you'll understand this sentence better when we go forward. In our case, we are talking about three features, that is age, gender, and job, right? So, and F is equal to 3. F is the number of features available. So let's look at this. So here you have a tree-like structure. And what we are going to do is we are going to consider all possible combinations of age, gender, and job. Now, when I say all possible combinations, I obviously mean by a power set. Okay, so if I consider a power set, it would obviously have 2 raised to 3, that is 8 possible correlations of features. Correlation as in combination. Okay, so I have 8 features here. So it starts with a null set, and then I have single individual features. Then I have a combination of these features, and then finally all the features together. So here my feature F is equal to 0. The number of features F is equal to 1, that is age, gender, and job. Here F is equal to 2, that is number of features is 2, age, job, gender, job. And here F is equal to 3, that is age, gender, and job, right? So these are our 8 nodes, which are the 8 correlation features. Here, each node represents the correlation. All right, so here it is no features. Here it is just one feature. Here it is 2 features, and so on. So this is the combination of features, or the correlation of features, as you call it. And each edge represents the inclusion of a feature not present in the previous correlation. So you can see here age is there, and here age was not there. Similarly, if you come here through this edge, here gender was not there earlier, now gender is there. So so each edge represents the inclusion of a feature not present in the previous correlation. I hope it is understandable. All right, and now we move one step ahead. What we're going to do is, once we build this model, okay, I'll just take you back once again. So this here, since it represents a coalition of features, what we are going to do is we are going to train the model now with only these features. Okay, so we have our existing model, which took age, gender, job which takes age, gender, job as input, and it gives the income as the output, right? So that is our model. Now to this model, we are going to train now 8 models, 8 distinct models, predictive models that we are going to use, in which each of this feature is going to be fed as input. So I just give age, or I just give age and gender. I give only gender, I give only job, and I'm going to train these models and keep it ready. Okay. And now once our 8 linear regression models are ready, one point that I missed out is, now these models are going to be same in terms of the hyperparameter and the training sets. Okay. All that is same. only what I'm doing is I'm changing the features that I'm giving in as an input to the model. Now, once my model is ready, what I'm going to do is I will now consider a new observation. So I'm going to call that observation X naught. Let that X naught be anything. Okay. So X naught can be a value where age is say 23, gender is male, and job is engineer. All right. So it could be any input. Now what I'll do is for that particular input, I'm going to see what is the output that each of my model is giving me. So here you can see, okay, each node here represents the model because it is the output of the model. Okay, each edge represents the marginal contribution of a feature. I'll come to it. I'll explain to you what is a marginal contribution. Okay, the first row in the node, it represents the coalition of features. So here in this case, there were no features. In this case, there was only the age as the input. Here it was age and gender as the input. And the second row, it represents the income predicted by X naught. Okay, so now for no features, the income predicted was $50K, which is nothing but the average income of all the training observations. All right. Now, if we move to node 2, okay, before that, I forgot to explain what is a marginal contribution. So marginal contribution, so you can see that when it was a null set, okay, the value predicted was $50K. And when I come down to this edge or to this node, right, with age as an input feature, the value predicted is around $40K, right? So the gap between the prediction of these two connected nodes can be attributed to the effect of the additional feature. So no features, $50K, addition of age, $40K. So can I say that with the addition of age, now it is, our prediction is lowered by $10, right? So this is called as the marginal contribution. So this edge represents the marginal contribution of age. Okay, so it is shown here. The marginal contribution of age to X naught is the prediction of age of X naught for age minus the prediction of X naught for null. Okay, so you see the prediction of X naught for age is 40K, and for null it is 50K, which is, this is just the average of all the training set. So the marginal contribution of age in this edge here is minus $10K. All right. I hope this part is clear to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, so if I want to, now that there's a rule that Shapley says, it says that the to calculate the marginal contribution of age in the final model, I'll have to consider the marginal contributions of age in all the models where age is present. So you see here, I have age present, I have age present here, I have age present here, and I have age present here. So if I want to understand the marginal contribution of age, okay, in the entire model, I have to calculate the marginal all these marginal contributions. And therefore, I now introduce something called as weights here. Okay, so the next question should be that how am I going to calculate the weights? So first, let me look at the formula. Let us look at the formula. So we're going to use a weighted average, and I'm going to say that the marginal, the SHAP value for age in X naught, or the contribution of age in X naught, is going to be calculated as W1 into marginal contribution of age in when only age is given as input, marginal contribution of age when age and gender is given as input, marginal contribution of age when age and job is given as input, and marginal contribution of age when age, gender, and job is given as input, right? So these are my 4 weights, and the value of all these weights together is supposed to be 1. Okay, so now how am I going to calculate these weights? So here we have the next theory coming in, that what the SHAP rule says is that the sum of the weights of all the marginal contributions to one feature model should be equal to the sum of weights of all the marginal contributions to 2 feature models. What I'm trying to say is that all weights here for f is equal to 0 should be, for f is equal to 1, all weights for f is equal to 1 should be equal to all weights for f is equal to 2, and should be equal to for all weights for f is equal to 3, which means W1 should be equal to W2 plus W3, which should be equal to W4. So this is one of the SHAP rules. Okay. And the other one says that all the weights of marginal contributions to F feature model should be equal to each other, which means that for a particular model, so for F is equal to 2, if there are two weights, then they have to be equal to each other. So that means W2 should be equal to W3. Okay. So I have W1, which is equal to W2 plus W3, which is equal to W4. And the other rule states that W2 is equal to W3. Okay. So now I have to find out the weights of all these. And here again, it is very simple to identify the weights. So basically, a very easy way to do it is the number of edges that you have. Okay. So here you can see there are 3 edges. So I'm just going to take a reciprocal of that, 1 by 3 each. Here I have 6 edges uh, for F is equal to 2, and therefore my each edge would be weighed as 1 by 6. And here again, I have 3 edges. So therefore the weight of each edge would be 1 by 3. All right. But another way to do it is by using binomial coefficient. So here you can see for feature F is equal to 0. Okay. If I take FCF, that is F is 3, 3C1, it will 3C0, it will give me 1. Right. Similarly, for F is equal to 1, 3C1 will give me 3. For F is equal to 2, 3C2 will give me 3. And for F is equal to 3, 3C3 will give me 1. And now I just have to simply multiply these two. That is 0 into 1 will give me 0. 1 into 3 will give me 3. 2 into 3 will give me 6. And 3 into 1 will give me 3. Right? So here 3 is the value, the number of edges. Here number of edges is going to be 6. And here the number of edges is going to be 3. So my formula now boils down to 1 into 3C1. This is what I said, the reciprocal of that. All right. And into the marginal contribution of age when when age is given as an input to X naught. And similarly for everything. Now, when I consider all the marginal contributions of age, I get the marginal contribution of age in the final model. And here you can see the value comes out to be minus 11.33. Okay. Now I can similarly find out the contribution of gender and job as well. And here you see the calculations have said minus $2.33K for gender and $46.66K for job. Okay. So what it basically tells me is that this is the contribution that age has to this model, the gender has to this model, and job has to this model. Okay. So you can see we are more relying on the person's job to decide what is going to be his salary, and very less on the gender. And of course, the age is also a factor, but then it is minus 11.33, right? So here, if you sum up these values, okay, of these marginal contributions, what you get is a value called as $33K, right? And if you see, it is exactly the difference between the output of the full model and the output of the dummy model. What I'm trying to see is $33. So you can see a dummy model is $50K, and the full model, it is giving me $83K. And this difference is $33, which you can see here, which you have calculated. Okay. So this is the fundamental characteristic of SHAP values, where summing the SHAP values of each feature of a given observation yields a difference between the prediction of the model and the null model. Okay, so I hope you've understood. Here we have tried to understand that for each input, what factor of it contributes to the output of the model. Okay, so that was SHAP. Now it is not as simple as this. So this particular formula is what was proposed by in this paper, Unified Approach to Interpreting Model Predictions. Of course, one thing that could come to your mind is it is not as easy as it looks. Okay, the reason being because here I've considered only 3 features. But what if I have 50 features? Because any real world model, you know, has got a lot of features. And as you increase the number of features, trying to have, you know, a power set, so 2 raised to 50 is going to be very difficult. So what SHAP does is it uses what you call it, approximations. It uses approximations, it uses samples as sampling techniques to get over this problem of you know, large features. And no, that's it. So to conclude, basically what I would like to say is that explainability would help us to better trust our complex models. So if you are able to explain your system to end users, then they'll be able to better understand your trust. They'll be able to better trust your model. it helps in debugging our model. I'm sure all of you agree that in most of these cases, it was kind of a, what do you say? It was so good for the developer of the system itself to see that the model was wrongly classifying things. And so I can definitely develop a better model if I have such explanations. Okay. It can detect bias in data, and we can explain our predictions, and of course regulations are making it mandatory, like GDPR. I'm sure very soon we will have a lot more regulations which make it mandatory for algorithmic decision making, right? You all must have heard of AI ethics also. It is some slightly inclined to this part. So I hope on this note I would like to end my session here. And I hope all of you now, when you decide to create machine learning models, you will also add the explainable part to it, so that the end user is able to better trust your system. Thank you. That's it from my side.
Okay, so we will be having a question and answer sessions now.
Yes, yes,
So
sure.
yeah,
Yes, so I
and
can read. So Mohammed has said how to practically understand this. So Mohammed, I would suggest that first of all, you should go through these papers that I have just mentioned. Lime is Why Do I Trust You? And all the models that I have mentioned, that is Li5 or DeepLift, all these. So there are many, the coding itself is also freely available on GitHub. So you can definitely go there, you can try running those algorithms, you can try running those explanations, and you will be able to understand it better. Right? It's available. Everything is available, Mohammed. Nothing should stop you. It is only probably that you all were not aware of this, but now that you are aware of it, I'm sure all of you can look for it. Yeah.
another question is there, how to process the images practically? It's a question.
Process images practically, matlab, that's what, na? So this explainable model, that interface helps you do it. So that's what I would suggest, that you go to the GitHub page of Lime and Shap, and they have given you examples where you can see that how this input images are perturbed and how the inputs are provided to the model. The code is available. You can all just explore it. Because see, finally we have, all our images, they are represented as vectors. So all you need to do is, hide some of the details.
Another question is there, do we have a different algorithm for text and image analysis under explainable AI?
No. So like I told you, Lime is Lime. See, I showed you text classification also, and I showed you image classification also for Lime. So Lime is basically model agnostic, which means that it is not looking at the working of the model. It is only looking at your input and output, and it is giving you explanations. And let me tell you that this is just the initial phase. Okay, if you go ahead, there are many algorithms, or there are many research papers that give you a lot of drawbacks of Lime. Lime is not the best algorithm. Okay. And there are many more algorithms that have come in, which are better than Lime, which are better than Shap. Like I told you, these are just the ones that are introduced earlier. And so I thought I should show it to you.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, actually I am working on explainable AI for healthcare image processing.
Okay.
So I want to know from you that is there any model that is anti-hoc? Like there are two type of model basically we can develop. One is post-hoc. First we will have the model and then we will try to explain that.
Correct.
So,
Sir, even I have come across only post hoc models till now. I mean, I've worked with only post hoc models. I am not aware of a anti hoc model. So something which is already baked into the system. No, I haven't. I am not aware of it.
is any suggestions from your side? Because it's
no, so it is
part
open.
of,
Yeah, it is open for research. It is open for research. You
Yeah.
can think about it. In fact, I would suggest you visit IIT Hyderabad. They are working on explainable AI, and they have put up some very good research papers. So you should definitely have a look at it. Okay.
Ma'am, one more question is there, that do we use combinations in Shap?
Combinations as in?
Ma'am, like you were telling about 3C1 and all that. So it's
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we do.
Yeah, that was mine question only.
Okay. Yeah. So that like I showed you, it was used to find out the number of weights of the number of edges.
So any more
Okay.
questions from the participants?
Okay, so I see a lot of saying that thank you. It was nice to meet you. Yeah, thank you so much. I was also very happy to be a part of this session, and thank you for being very nice audience. Yeah, and I hope most of you would start, looking and reading more into explainable AI. And I hope that we do not have to see another or face another AI winter, because our systems are not able to explain. So thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
yeah.
So last but not the least, I would like to thank our special guest, Professor A. Thomas ma'am, who despite of her busy schedule has found time to grace this session with her valuable knowledge. And I also express my heartfelt thanks to Mrs. Sonal Patil ma'am for taking one more such initiative, resulting in the organization of this session. I thank all the distinguished invitees present here who accepted our invitation and attended the session with utmost patience and attention. I hope all the students would have enjoyed the session and learned something new which can upgrade their knowledge. Again, I would like to make you aware about the thing that we are having a valedictory session at 4 p.m. So all of you are cordially invited, and it's a sincere request to all to join the session 5 minutes earlier for your convenience. The link for the same will be shared with you to the WhatsApp group. Thank you. Stay home, stay safe.
Thank you so much.